Hey guys, tonight we drift into the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. No lights, no engines, just the rhythm of waves and a sky full of stars so bright they look close enough to touch. You're lying on a wooden deck somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow on a canoe that creaks gently like an old storyteller. The sea rocks beneath you like a cradle, but there's purpose in its lullaby. Ahead, there is no land in sight. Behind, just the horizon swallowing darkness. You're a navigator now, or you're trying to be. But spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this without some serious guidance. Because here's the twist. No compass, no GPS, not even a cheeky spyglass. Just a mind trained to read clouds like books. Birds like omens and stars like ancient whispers in a living map. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe beneath you is sleek, long lashed together with rope made from coconut fiber. The planks are smoothed by salt and thyme, and your back rests against bundles of tapa cloth. You can smell brine-aged wood and the faint floral tang of fermented breadfruit. It's not unpleasant. It's just ancient. Your teacher, a wayfinder, sits cross-legged at the prow. He hasn't said much yet. You suspect that's the test. In this world, silence speaks more than speeches. You study his profile, the gentle slope of his nose, the way his eyes scan the sky without ever really landing on it. This is your first night in open ocean. You're hours from the last island, days from the next. The canoe creaks again, groaning like it knows secrets. Around you, the water sparkles with phosphorescence. Tiny organisms glowing like liquid starlight. You trail your fingers through them and watch your own outline glow. You remember what your elder said. The stars are not just above you. They are below you, too swimming with the fish. You glance up. The sky is shockingly clear. No light pollution, no airplanes, no satellites. Blinking reminders of modern life. Just stars, dense, endless, and arranged in patterns your modern brain half recognizes from app icons and astrology memes. But here, they are not decorations. They are destinations. The Southern Cross hangs low near the horizon. Orion's belt leans sideways, as if lying down to nap. The moon, not yet full, hangs over the outrigger like a lantern. You pull your cloak tighter. The wind has teeth, but it's soft for now, more breath than bite. Your teacher finally speaks. Close your eyes, he says. You hesitate, then obey. Feel the canoe, he murmurs. At first, all you feel is the rocking. Then more. A thrum. A sideways tug. A dip at the stern. You realize the canoe is telling you a story not with words, but rhythm. The waves are from the east, he says. A swell is coming from the south. And the wind feels unsettled. Listen again. You do. And somehow it's true. You can feel it. Not see, not hear, feel. The swell isn't dramatic, just different. Like the ocean shifting its weight in its sleep. This is your first real lesson. The sea doesn't shout, it whispers. You open your eyes again. The stars are waiting. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigation was truly as advanced as the oral histories claim. Some believed these were accidental drift voyages, luck dressed as legacy. But here on this canoe, feeling every shift in the ocean's breath, you know better. The wind changes slightly. You watch as your teacher adjusts. A line tightens the sail, then simply nods as if acknowledging the ocean's suggestion. You want to ask questions about the names of the stars, about how you'll know if you're on course, about what happens if you aren't. But instead, you sit. You feel the canoe again. You breathe in the ocean's rhythm. And slowly, you begin to understand why the greatest navigators didn't carry maps. They became the map. The horizon remains empty, but something inside you is stirring. Not fear, not doubt, just awareness. And under the stars, that's enough. You're still seated on the gently rocking canoe, the stars like pinpricks overhead, and the scent of salt thick in your nostrils. But tonight, you're not watching the sky. Tonight, you're listening. Your teacher taps the wooden edge of the canoe twice, then points out across the water. The ocean speaks, he says simply. You just haven't learned the grammar yet. At first, you don't get it. The sea is just the sea. Wet, wavy, occasionally rude. But as you close your eyes and let your other senses take over, you notice something different. The motion beneath you isn't random. It's layered. Like listening to an orchestra. Only the violins are swells and the bassoons are wind chops. You feel a deep, slow rise and fall. Long, rolling swells from far away. But there's also a choppier rhythm overlaid coming from a different angle. Two languages at once. Somehow, you begin to understand both. This is your next lesson, reading the ocean's pulse. Polynesian navigators were trained not only to see, but to feel. Wave refraction around islands. The bounce of swells against distant atolls. The tug of currents born hundreds of miles away. These weren't hidden mysteries. They were part of a readable, living map. Your teacher moves to the center of the canoe and stands. The moonlight paints him in silver. With feet spread wide, he balances effortlessly, rocking in sync with the canoe. You try it. You nearly fall into the sea. Start smaller. He chuckles. Listen with your hips. You kneel instead and focus. The canoe has a beat, a pulse, a whisper. And slowly you begin to distinguish the sources. There's the main swell pushing from the east, long and predictable. But then there's something subtler. A cross swell, smaller, nudging you slightly northward. It's like trying to feel which side of your blanket is warmer without moving. But you do feel it. Eventually. The motion isn't smooth, it's layered, nuanced, full of hints. You start to understand why Polynesian wayfinding is often described not as a science, but as an art. And maybe even more than that, a form of storytelling. Every rise and fall of the canoe is part of a sentence. Every shift, a new clause. The ocean tells you where it has come from, where it is going, and what's in its way. Your teacher shows you how to lie flat across the deck, arms and legs splayed like a sea star. Now, he says, feel it like the canoe does. Flat on your back, you become part of the hull. The swells aren't just motion, they're memory. That deeper swell. It probably started thousands of miles away, driven by a storm long over. The quicker chop, closer wind, impatient and temporary. Your body pressed into the planks becomes a receiver. Historians still argue whether the sensitivity of ancient Polynesian navigators was trained or somehow inherited. Could someone really learn to read the ocean by touch alone? Or was it something only a few could ever master? You feel a tiny, sharp ripple hit the canoe from the port side. Your teacher points without looking. There's land over there, he says. Then pauses. Far. But there. How do you know, you ask? The sea got complicated, he replies. And just like that, you get it. An island disturbs the swell pattern. The ocean doesn't forget obstacles. It reflects bends, ripples. And if you're quiet enough to notice, if you learn the grammar, you'll see the echo in the waves. Later, he brings out a coconut shell. dips it in the water, and lets it float beside the boat. You both watch silently as it wobbles, then slowly begins to circle clockwise. The current changed, he says. We're riding the edge of a gyre now. You repeat the word silently, gyre. It feels like magic. But really, it's physics dressed in ocean skin. This is what you're learning, not just to navigate, but to notice. Everything matters. Every bump, every roll, every unexpected lurch or lull. The ocean isn't just water. It's memory made liquid. Later still, your teacher hands you a gourd filled with tea brewed from island bark. It's bitter, but it sharpens your senses. As you sip, you notice how your body now moves automatically with the boat. You've stopped bracing. You've started sinking. A small thing, but it means a lot. That night, long after the stars have shifted overhead, you wake briefly to the canoe's soft yaw. You don't open your eyes. You don't need to. You feel the east swell beneath your back, steady and familiar. And a second pulse, newer, bouncing from the south. You smile into the darkness. You know exactly where you are. Your eyes open just before dawn, that curious hour, when the stars still cling stubbornly to the sky. Yet the horizon starts to blush with the promise of light. The world is quiet, but not still. The canoe glides forward as though pulled by a thread only the sea can see. Around you, the ocean is calm, painted silver and ink by the half-light. But above is where the story unfolds tonight. Your teacher is already awake, already watching the sky. He gestures silently, and you join him near the front of the canoe. No speeches, no scrolls, just sky. Begin naming them, he says without turning his head. You squint. The sky is so full it feels like it might spill over. You recognize Orion first. Those 3 belt stars you once thought were just decoration in a planetarium. Belt of Orion, you whisper. Wrong name, he says gently, but close. He points higher. That's Ka Lupe o Coelho. See how it curves? That's how we steer eastward in spring. And so begins your next lesson. How stars are not just to be admired, but followed. For Polynesian navigators, the stars were more than constellations. They were compass points, seasonal clocks, ancestral voices. Star names varied between islands, but their rising and setting positions were consistent, reliable, and when memorized, transformative. You lie back again this time, not just to feel the canoe, but to see the sky better. The air is chilly, but your focus overrides discomfort. He begins to recite names. Hikianalia, A'a Lahuakona. You repeat them, some sticking immediately, others slipping away like water through fingers. Then comes the real challenge. Now tell me where they rise. You blink. All of them. He shrugs. Eventually, you learn that each star has a rising point where it appears on the horizon and a setting point on the opposite side. These aren't random. They form a kind of sidereal compass, with dozens of stars assigned to specific bearings. Your mind scrambles to hold the pattern to shape the night into something structured. He draws a faint circle in the air, marking the 4 cardinal directions, then subdivides it into points with star names. It's like watching someone sketch a compass using constellations and breath. You practice aligning the canoe's bow with these stellar points. If Puana rises just off the left shoulder, he says, you're going southwest. But if it's above the mast, you've drifted. He doesn't explain more. He lets you feel it, intuit it, remember it. Historians still argue whether these star compasses were taught orally with this level of precision, or passed down through riddles, chants, and metaphor? The answer is likely both. You're beginning to see how memory here is not just preserved, it's rehearsed nightly in the body, the sky, and the sea. As dawn begins to stretch across the horizon, the stars begin to vanish one by one. First the faintest, then the bold. It feels like losing pieces of your map, but your teacher only smiles. This is why we memorize, he says, because morning always comes. You nod, swallowing the lesson like a cold gulp of seawater. Star positions are fixed across generations. Your ancestors used these same guides, and now so do you. The sky changes by season, yes, but it also repeats cycling predictably, like a melody. You just need to hum often enough to learn. As the sun rises fully, the stars disappear completely. But the memory remains. Later, you practice reciting your night sky. North to south, east to west, naming rising points, matching them to wind directions, remembering which stars to follow during monsoon season versus drought. You stumble. You forget. You start over. But slowly it sticks. By midday, the canoe rests on calm waters. The wind has eased. You chew dried fish and fruit, eyes half closed, head still tilted skyward even in daylight. Because even now, even with no stars visible, your mind traces them. That night when the darkness returns and the constellations come blinking back into place like faithful companions, you're ready. Your teacher says nothing. He just points. You name them. You mark their bearings. And when the canoe shifts slightly southward, you feel it and correct. You're not perfect, but you're becoming a map. The next day greets you with calm waters and a canvas of uninterrupted blue. The stars are gone for now, tucked behind the daylight, but your mind is still busy sketching constellations in their absence. You've memorized a dozen rising points and a handful of setting ones, and though your accuracy is still, let's call it enthusiastic rather than reliable, your teacher seems mildly impressed. Today, he takes a different approach. He doesn't point to the sky, he hands you a woven chart. You sit cross-legged, unrolling it across your lap. It's strange, fragile, and firm all at once. Thin strips of coconut frond curve and cross, lashed at intersections with twine. At first glance, it looks abstract, but your teacher traces a finger along a line. This is a swell, he says. Another line curves the opposite way. That's its reflection. You blink. It's a map. He nods. It's a memory. Welcome to your fourth lesson, the magic of stick charts and memory palaces. These aren't maps in the way you're used to. There are no drawn coastlines, no legends, no colorful cartouches of sea monsters. Just stick shells and the language of waves. Shells mark islands sometimes. Other times, the entire chart is symbolic, meant not to show, but to trigger memory. The curves show wave interactions. The straight lines indicate consistent swells. The arrangement, pure mnemonic genius. This particular style comes from the Marshall Islands, but Polynesian voyaging cultures across Oceania developed variations. Some were private personal tools passed from master to apprentice. Others were communal, like song lines in the sea. You trace the pattern with your fingers. It feels strange, as if you're running your hands across a coded dream. Can you read it? You ask. Your teacher shrugs. I don't need to. I remember. That's the key. These aren't meant to be used mid-voyage. They're studied beforehand. Memorized. Internalized. You're meant to see the sea and feel the chart within you. The sticks aren't instructions, they're rehearsal. Historians still argue whether these charts were literal, abstract, or even misunderstood entirely by Western observers. But no one denies their beauty. or the brilliance of a navigational system rooted in rhythm and recall. You spend hours learning the chart. Your teacher makes you close your eyes and trace it again from memory. Where's the counterswell, he asks. You pause, then point. Where's the reflected wave? You pause longer, then point again. Good, he says. But you paused. You groan, I thought. He smiles. Exactly. Next time, don't. Eventually, he takes the chart away. He hands you a different one, simpler, more geometric. This one shows just 3 islands and a pair of intersecting swells. You're to memorize it without writing, drawing, or repeating it aloud. Just observation. Just silence. You stare until your eyes blur, then close them. Try to hold the image. Fail. Try again. In your frustration, your teacher offers a metaphor. The brain, he says, is like a canoe. It takes time to balance. If you rush, you capsize. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th attempt, the chart lodges itself in your mind. Not as an image, but as a shape. You can feel the curves of the swells, the angle of intersection, the placement of the shells like footsteps in sand. That night, you lie on the deck again, chartless, lightless, and trace the pattern with your fingers in the air. Not because you have to, but because you can. And in the faint roll of the canoe, you sense the same swells, the same directions. You whisper the placement of the islands not aloud, just to your own heartbeat. And the sea answers. Morning breaks with the cries of seabirds. Not many, just 2 or 3, spiraling above the outrigger, like living punctuation marks. You sit up slowly, stretching your arms as your joints crackle like old sailcloth. The canoe is still slicing forward gently but steadily under a light wind. Your teacher is already awake, of course. He always is. And today, he's not looking at the stars or the waves or the charts. He's watching birds. He doesn't speak right away, just follows their flight with his eyes narrow and calculating. You watch too, trying to see what he sees. It looks like aimless soaring at first. But then one bird veers sharply northwest. The second hesitates, then follows. A moment later, the third turns the same way. Land, your teacher says quietly. You squint at the horizon. Nothing but shimmering blue. Are you sure they're not feeding? He says. They're commuting. And that's your 5th lesson, birds as waypoints. You learn quickly that not all seabirds are created equal. Some, like frigate birds, can stay aloft for days without touching down. Others, like noddies and terns, must return to land to roost every night. Watching them isn't just watching nature. It's watching a schedule. If they fly out in the morning and return in the evening, you know land lies in the direction they vanish toward. And if they return with full gullets or seaweed in their beaks, you know what kind of land it is. Green, hospitable, awake. That afternoon, you spend hours tracking bird patterns. You lie back again, but this time not to feel the ocean. You're scanning the sky, counting flaps, judging flight angles, trying to decipher intention from movement. Do they always lead you home, you ask? Sometimes, your teacher says. Sometimes they lead you in circles. He explains that a clever navigator watches for multiple indicators. Birds, clouds, currents, the smell of distant vegetation. No sign acts alone. Everything sings in harmony, or it lies. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators used birds as primary tools or supporting ones. Some Western accounts dismiss the method as folklore, but here, watching the sky, you see the precision. A single bird can mean little. A pattern of birds. That's navigation. You also learn bird behavior isn't the only clue. You watch for feces in the water, Yes, glamorous stuff, because where birds excrete, they've likely eaten. And where they've eaten, land is close. It's not romantic, but it's real. And in a canoe, hundreds of miles from anything, reality is gold. Later, your teacher tells you about an old method tying a bird's leg with a string to the canoe. Let it fly. See where it pulls. If it circles frantically and then lands back, no land. But if it strains hard in one direction, you'd be smart to follow. You think of ancient navigators, silent in their canoes, watching the sky like scholars watch equations. You think of the patience it takes to see signal in flapping wings. And you begin to admire the quiet discipline required to notice. By evening, you spot the same 3 birds again. They appeared just before dusk, tracing their path backward. This time, you point first, northwest. Your teacher nods. You go to sleep that night with the faint rustle of feathers still in your ears. And in your dream, the birds don't just fly. They speak. Dawn doesn't come with a loud announcement. It just happens. Soft light creeping into the folds of the ocean, shadows slowly retreating, and the scent of warm, rising salt in the air. You blink yourself awake, still lying near the mast, and notice a change, not in the sea's rhythm, but in its color. It's subtle at first, just a shift in tone. The blue is less navy, more turquoise. A warmer kind of shimmer dances on the surface. You lean over the edge and squint into the water. It's clearer now, brighter. There's something under this change, a whisper of presence. Your teacher joins you crouching beside the hull. He dips a hand into the water, scoops some up, and lets it fall back like a slow-motion waterfall. "We're close," he murmurs. You scan the horizon. Still nothing. No land, no palm trees, not even a smudge of hope. He sees your doubt. "You're looking with your eyes," he says. "Try your nose." And there it is. Lesson 6. Finding islands by cloud, smell and see color. You close your eyes. Inhale deeply. The usual brine and wood and sweat. But beneath that, something else. Something green. You breathe again. Faint, but it's there. The scent of earth warmed by sun, of trees, rustling far away, of flowers you've never seen blooming on soil you haven't touched. Your teacher explains certain islands give themselves away with their smell. It travels on the breeze, low and quiet but steady. When the wind shifts and you catch that first trace of greenery, it's like hearing a song before the singer appears. But smell isn't the only clue. You look back at the water. He guides your gaze. Look for the yellow. You stare until your eyes adjust. There, near the edge of vision, the water turns slightly golden, a patch unlike the rest of the sea. Shallower reef, he says. It changes the light. Historians still argue whether this kind of environmental reading was consistent across Polynesian societies, or whether it developed in isolated pockets. But as you watch the colors shift, it's clear the knowledge is real, ancient, yes, but deeply tuned. Then come the clouds. You notice them in the distance. Not storm clouds, these are puffier, brighter, like cumulus wearing lays. See that, your teacher says. High, flat base. That's land cloud. You frown. Clouds are clouds. Not all. He replies. Some only form over land. You learn that islands cause air to rise, form heat columns, and give clouds a kind of uplift. The result: a formation that holds its base longer, flattens out more consistently, and tends to hover. These are not the flashy clouds of fiction. They're the slow, dependable ones. The librarians of the sky. You try tracking the same cloud for an hour. It doesn't budge. It just floats lazily, loyally in place, like a soft, puffy lighthouse. Your teacher laughs at your fascination. It's not magic, he says. It's patience. Throughout the day, the sea continues changing. You spot more golden hues than darker patches underwater rocks or coral heads. The wind smells sweeter. The clouds cluster. And still no land in sight. But then just as the sun leans westward, you spot a faint flicker near the horizon. Not land. Not a bird. A reflection. Lagoon water, your teacher says, mirroring the sky. You squint. It's hard to tell. It looks like a trick. But he nods again. By nightfall, we'll see the trees. And you do. The first glimpse of land isn't cinematic. It's a quiet outline, low green, almost timid. The trees don't leap into view. They slowly emerge as if embarrassed to be noticed. You stare at it for a long time, not because it's dramatic, but because you realize you smelled it before you saw it. You saw its clouds before its coast. You watched its color in the water before your feet ever touched sand. That night you curl up beneath the outrigger eyes, fluttering closed. And in your dreams, clouds gather above fragrant winds, painting silent poems of distant shores. You step onto the shore like someone re-entering the world, not with fanfare, but with reverence. Your feet sink slightly into warm sand. It clings to your heels and whispers, "Welcome back." The island is modest, a sloping patch of green nestled in the wide blue, but to you it feels like a cathedral. You take a moment just to breathe. The trees lean gently toward the lagoon branches, heavy with breadfruit and banana. Birds flit in and out of the canopy. You don't rush. After days on open sea, the stillness feels almost foreign, like the air itself is holding its breath, so as not to disturb you. But your teacher is already moving. He walks past the tree line toward a grove of stacked logs and husked coconuts. There, half buried in the sand and lashed with coconut rope, lies another canoe, larger, older, adorned with shellwork and darkened with sun and smoke. You follow. "This one stayed," he says, resting his hand on its side. "Yours moved." You tilt your head. "The canoe is alive," he says. "It learns your weight, your balance, your direction, but only if you treat it like memory." Which brings you to Lesson 7, the wisdom of double-hulled canoes. You crouch beside the vessel and run your fingers over its surface. The wood is smooth, but not soft. Every inch of it is handmade, carved, sewn, adjusted. No nails, no metal, just tradition and tension, holding everything in place. Your own canoe waits near the shore, double-hulled, long and lean. Two outriggers, connected by a central deck laced tight with sinew and intention. You realize now, this wasn't just transportation. It was architecture, a floating village, a lesson in balance. The double hull provides stability, not just physically, but psychologically. In rough waters, it doesn't capsize easily. It absorbs the sea's anger, like a reed absorbs wind. Flexible, not fragile. Strong because it listens. You spend the afternoon walking the canoe's length, barefoot, learning its story. Each plank is from a tree chosen for how it grew straight. Yes, but also obedient. Trees that bent toward the sun in particular ways were believed to carry memory, and therefore made better hulls. If a tree remembers light, your teacher says it will remember how to carry you forward. You pause at the lashings twists of coconut fiber hardened with salt and time. They creak when touched, but they hold, always. Historians still debate the scale and frequency of long-distance Polynesian voyages, but no one denies the genius of these vessels. Double-hulled canoes could carry families' pig supplies, even plants for transplanting across islands. They were not rafts, they were floating ecosystems. Your teacher shows you how to step lightly across the crossbeams without disturbing balance. Heavy feet make a heavy mind, he says. Learn to float. Later, you sit at the bow with a stone and beeswax rubbing down the joints where the wood meets the binding. This is maintenance, yes, but it's also a kind of blessing. Every part of the canoe is sacred because it remembers your journey, even when you forget. As evening falls, he hands you a long paddle. Not to row, but to feel. You dip it gently into the water beside the canoe, letting it trail. The resistance tells you more than the wind does. You sense the direction of the current, the pull of the reef's shadow, the echo of coral below. The canoe isn't just transportation. It's a second skin. You sleep that night in the sand curled near the hull like a cat curled beside a campfire. The tide slips quietly up and down, whispering to the wood in a language you're just beginning to hear. And in your dream, the canoe doesn't sail across the ocean. It glides through memory. Yours, the teacher's, and the ocean's. You wake before the sun stirred by the scent of salt and something faintly smoky drifting from the trees. The island is still asleep, save for the gentle rustling of palm fronds and the distant call of a bird already too ambitious for this hour. You stretch bones clicking like wood knots and shuffle toward the canoe where your teacher waits. He's sitting perfectly still, cross-legged hands resting on his knees, like someone about to meditate or deliver bad news. You've learned the sky, he says. You've listened to the sea, but your body hasn't yet caught up to your mind. You blink. I slept. He grins. Sleeping and knowing are different things. Which brings you to lesson 8. Training the body to remember what the mind forgets. This isn't about fitness in the modern sense. There are no push-ups or bench presses involved. This is about endurance, balance, and subtle forms of control. You don't need strength to survive on a canoe. You need rhythm. You need instinct. You start with standing drills on the crossbeams. The canoe is moored in calm water, but it still sways gently with each passing wave. You're told to walk across it heel to toe without flinching. Easy, you think. Until the 5th step. The beam flexes underfoot. Your knees overcorrect. Your arms flail. The ocean laughs. Your teacher watches without comment. You try again, this time slower. You realize quickly that it's not about resisting the motion. It's about joining it. The canoe moves, so you move. Like dancing with someone who leads by not leading. You practice for hours. Crossbeam to crossbeam, again and again. You're allowed to fall in once. Then you have to climb back without tipping the canoe. You do. It's not graceful, but it's done. Next comes balance sitting. You're placed at the stern with your legs folded and hands on your knees. The boat rocks. You don't. This goes on for what feels like days. The trick isn't to freeze, it's to flow. To let the ocean pass through you. Later, you're handed a bowl of sour root mash and told to eat it without spilling a drop, even as the canoe is tugged this way and that by a series of well-meaning children pretending to be waves. It's absurd. It's hilarious. It's absolutely part of the training. Then comes fasting. Not entirely. Your teacher isn't trying to break you, but you eat less. Just coconut water. A handful of taro dried fish. Enough to live, not enough to feel heavy. The idea isn't asceticism. It's lightness. A wayfinder doesn't lead by weight. He leads by presence. Historians still argue how systematic this kind of physical training was. whether it was ritualized or intuitive. But oral histories speak of long paddles, weeks of balance drills, days spent lying motionless to train the back, to recognize swells without thought. By midweek, your gait has changed. You no longer stomp the way you did on land. You walk with bent knees, soft steps. Your hips sway slightly. Not because you're trying to look poetic, but because that's how you stay standing when the canoe rolls. You sleep less but deeper. You wake without jolting. You stretch without creaking. You stop noticing the sway. Your teacher nods once, a sign of progress, so rare you consider carving it into a tree. Then he challenges you. You'll take the canoe out tomorrow. Alone. You gulp. Where to nowhere? He shrugs. Just away. And back. You don't know what terrifies you more, the away or the back. That night you lie awake beside the canoe, tracing the stars with your eyes, feeling the sea's rhythm through the sand. You listen to your breathing, your heartbeat, the gentle shifting of wood beside you. You're not ready, but your body is closer than your mind admits. The morning air is thick with anticipation and sea mist. You stand barefoot on the shore, staring at the canoe like it's grown teeth overnight. It hasn't, of course. It still looks like it did yesterday, polished wood, coiled rope, soft curves, and that deceptively peaceful sway. But today, it's different. Today, it's yours. Your teacher hands you a paddle, not ceremoniously, just casually, like passing salt at dinner. No stars this time, he says. Just memory. You nod, trying to seem calmer than your stomach suggests. You push off gently. The canoe glides into the lagoon with a soft swish, as if it too is holding its breath. You settle in, grip the paddle, and begin. The outrigger flexes slightly as you find rhythm. It's familiar, but new. Without your teacher's presence, the space around you feels wider, the ocean larger. Your breath is louder than usual. You focus on the technique, dip-pull, lift-slide, but it's not long before you're distracted. Because the sky is changing. The sun has climbed just enough to scatter golden light across the water. The shadows are soft and long. The sea is calm, but not still. There's movement beneath the skin. And now you must remember. Lesson 9, the sidereal compass. You stop paddling. Let the canoe drift. Then look up. The stars are gone, lost in daylight. But you close your eyes, and there they are, etched in memory. You whisper Hikianalia rises at the eastern shoulder. Aa at the western wrist. Kalia. Kalia is due south. The sidereal compass isn't drawn. It's held. A mental map of where the stars rise and set, each one corresponding to a direction, to a line invisible but firm. You position the canoe toward where you remember Hikianalia rising. You feel it in your ribs more than you see it. The canoe moves slowly, pushed by the faintest wind. But your hands don't touch the sail. This is about orientation, not speed. You test yourself. Where would the moon rise during full tide in spring? Which stars or stars would flank it? What's due north when Orion's belt is tilted? Each question brings you deeper into memory, into that inner map that only gets clearer with stillness. Historians still argue how precise these mental compasses were. Some claim ancient navigators memorized 32 star paths each, with fixed rising and setting points like a wheel of celestial direction. Others suggest a more fluid understanding, guided by chant and story. But as you sit there scanning an empty sky with a full mind, it feels more like both. You begin to move again, adjusting your angle slightly. You feel the swells return beneath your feet, a familiar tug that tells you you're nearing the edge of the reef. You test your positioning. Watch the clouds, the color of the water, the scent on the wind. Then an unexpected shift. The wind dips. A swell crosses beneath at an unfamiliar angle. You're off course. Not drastically, but enough that your gut tightens. You remember your teacher's words. If the canoe feels wrong, stop paddling. You do. You let the canoe drift. You close your eyes. And in that stillness, you adjust your position. Not by force, by feeling. The swell rights itself under you. The breeze returns. You paddle gently, redirecting along the line you know only by instinct. There's no applause, no bird to guide you, no constellation blinking approval. Just you, the swell, the remembered stars, and the slow realization that you've found the direction again. By midday, the island is back in sight, a dark smudge of trees framed by the shimmer of water. You don't rush. You let the canoe move on its own. You feel where it wants to go. You guide gently, not with muscle, but suggestion. And when you land, your teacher is there sitting in the shade as if he knew the exact moment you'd return. You step out of the canoe. He says nothing, just stands, takes the paddle, and points upward. Tonight, he says, you steer by stars again. You don't answer. You just nod. Because now you carry the stars whether they're visible or not. That night, the sky returns in full black velvet, spread tight, stitched with stars so dense they seem to hum. The ocean reflects them like a second sky, flickering and wavering with every ripple. You sit once more at the helm of the canoe, salt-crusted and wind-kissed feeling, both tiny and infinite. Your teacher joins you. He says nothing for a long while, letting the silence settle like dew. Then finally, a new phrase. Tonight we practice turning back. You turn, startled. Turning back. He nods slowly. Not every voyage is forward. Lesson 10. How to turn around without losing yourself. You've learned how to read the stars, the sea, the birds, and clouds. You've trained your body to balance your hands to guide and your eyes to spot change before it arrives. But tonight, it's not about direction. It's about humility. You begin with familiar bearings. You name the stars as they rise. You trace their invisible lines across the sky. You orient the canoe accordingly and begin paddling. You feel steady, competent, maybe even confident. Then he says it again. Now turn. You pause. Why? Because the sea said so. This time he gives no other clues, no corrections, no approval. Just sits watching, waiting. You stop paddling, slow your breath, and listen. At first, everything seems fine. The swell is steady, the wind mild, the stars exact. But then, something. A change in the swell's pitch. A faint tension in the wind. The water seems to pull at an odd angle. Not dramatic, just wrong. You remember the sea whispers. You exhale. Let the canoe drift. You look up. The stars still hold their positions. But somehow, the story has changed. Turning back isn't just about reversing direction. It's about recognizing when the sea has shifted. The story, when your pride can't be trusted, when moving forward would lead not to land, but to loss. Historians still debate how ancient navigators made such decisions. Was it instinct observation? Divine signs? Likely a blend of all three. And sometimes perhaps just the courage to say, not today. You begin the turn, not in a circle, but in an arc. Gentle, deliberate, tracing a reverse path along remembered star lines. You name the constellations backward. You recall the feel of the swell from earlier. The scent that once came from starboard now returns from port. Turning feels different, heavier somehow. There's a quiet ache in reversing course, not failure exactly, but a reckoning. You're not retreating. You're listening. As you correct the sail and shift your position, you hear the change. The creak of the outrigger now aligns with the swell again. The wind brushes your cheek like a nod. The stars rise in patterns that once meant depart and now mean return. Your teacher smiles just a little. Good. You anchor again near the island and sit in stillness. He finally speaks. Every navigator must know when to turn back. Not because they are lost, but because they are wise. You stay seated long after he steps away, watching the sky reorient itself around your still canoe. The stars haven't moved, but you have. And in that change, something inside you has shifted. You lie back and let the world rotate above you. Not every journey ends at a destination. Some end in the strength to change direction. And tonight, that strength is yours. Tonight, there's no teacher beside you. No quiet commentary. No paddle passed with a grin. It's just you. The canoe in the open sea. A long, dark ribbon unfolding into forever. The moon is low and wide, a molten disk, casting soft light that skims the waves and paints the wood of the deck in silver. You've trained for this. Not for a drill. Not for a lesson. For the real thing. The stars begin their ascent with slow confidence. One by one, familiar names blink into place. Hikianalia, Lehuakona, Aaka, Lupe, Okawelo. You greet each like old friends. And though your lips move silently, it feels like you're speaking to them. They answer not in words, but in orientation, in clarity, in presence. You check the sail. Feel the tension in the ropes. It's enough. You set your course based on memory, not from maps or charts, but from the compass inside your chest. Lesson 11 is unspoken, but understood voyaging without instruments. No compass swings in your hand. No sextant glints under the stars. No GPS chirps instructions from a satellite. There's just sky, wind, sea, and you. Polynesian navigators, centuries before the invention of European navigational tools, sailed between islands thousands of miles apart, using only observation and memorized environmental cues. For centuries, Western scholars couldn't believe it was possible. Some assumed accidental drift. Others thought the oral traditions were exaggerations. But the canoe beneath your feet tonight argues otherwise. You paddle slowly out of the lagoon. The breeze is soft but steady, blowing from the southeast. You align your course to a sidereal point just west of due north. The canoe glides forward, not fast, but with the smooth certainty of a story long told. You begin to feel what it means to navigate, not simply to move, but to know while moving. The ocean no longer feels like an enemy or a void. It feels like a language. You feel the swell. 2 overlapping rhythms. One broad and slow, the other sharper. You adjust. No thought, just response. You hear the wind. It whispers through the lines differently when you shift 5 degrees. You listen. You feel the difference in your ribs before your ears catch it. You glance at the horizon. Still dark. Still empty. But the clouds are thick in one direction, possibly a shadow of land below. You remember land clouds gather differently, hang lower, thicker at the base. You taste the air, a faint bitterness. Open sea. You remember the sweetness of green islands and know you're not close yet. And you trust yourself. The canoe moves with you. Or maybe it leads. Either way, you're in rhythm. Time disappears. Hours pass. The moon climbs, then begins to fall. The stars shift wheel across the sky like spokes. You track them not with your eyes, but with your memory. The sky tells time, distance, and bearing if you know how to ask. You sip from your water pouch, eat a strip of dried coconut. Just enough. You keep the body light, the mind anchored. Then just before dawn, a bird. You almost miss it. Just a shadow skimming the edge of your vision. But it's there. A tern. Flying low. Purposeful. You smile. And you adjust the canoe's bearing slightly to match. You don't need to ask your teacher if it's right. You don't need anyone to nod approval. You sail forward. No destination in sight. Just trust. Stitched with memory. Paddling beneath a sky that now feels familiar, even when it's empty. This is not a lesson anymore. This is navigation. You don't dock. You glide. The canoe noses into the shallows like it's known this shoreline its entire life. Your legs ache as you step into ankle-deep water, and the cool rush over your feet feels like applause. You made it, not by following blinking instruments or a chart rolled up in a satchel, but by feeling wind against your cheekbones and naming stars like cousins. And now, under a halo of seabirds and rising sun, you reach the 12th chapter in your quiet saga Hokulea, in the rebirth of ancient memory. You've never seen her before this other canoe, but the shape is unmistakable. Hokulea rests further down the beach, lashed to a line of palm trunks. Her double hull broad and proud, her deck polished by thousands of miles of wind, salt, and song. She isn't a relic. She's a revival. A promise in wood. You approach with reverence. A crew member, barefoot, sun-tanned eyes, alert nods as you get closer. She doesn't ask what you're doing here. She can already tell. You sit beside the hull and rest your hand on it. And there it is. The heartbeat of a tradition that nearly faded, pulled back into life by those who refused to let memory die. In 1976, Hokulea made her first journey from Hawaii to Tahiti. No compass, no GPS, just traditional navigation, just wayfinding. The skeptics said it couldn't be done. The world had long doubted the oral histories, brushing aside chants and stories as metaphor. But the ocean never forgot. Led by master navigator Maupiai Lug of Micronesia, Hokulea proved the skeptics wrong. Her successful voyage resurrected pride across Polynesia. What was nearly myth became lived truth again. You sit with the crew for a meal, taro coconut dried mango, and listen as they talk. Not loudly, but with that same quiet confidence your teacher has. Like people who don't need to convince you they know. They speak of night sails, of adjusting to clouds and trusting the reef's hiss beneath the hull. They joke about fish that jump aboard uninvited and wind that plays favorites. One tells a story about a time they followed stars all night and arrived exactly where they needed to be. Not because of magic, but because they trusted what they knew. Historians still debate whether all ancient voyages were planned or some were accidents. The truth may never be fully charted. But when you sit here beside Hokulea, when you see her lines, feel her weight, and hear her stories, you don't need to argue. You just listen. They invite you aboard. You step lightly, instinctively, checking your balance on the crossbeams. You know how to move now. You've trained for this. The navigator on deck shows you their star compass, carved on a wooden circle, its points labeled not with degrees, but with names. You recognize several already. You mouth them in rhythm, your voice barely above the wind. Later you watch as they prepare for departure. Ropes are checked. Sails, furled offerings, placed carefully. Banana leaf bundles. Tea leaves a gourd of water. You don't join this voyage. You're not ready. Not for this crew. Not yet. But you're invited to help push the canoe into the water to feel the weight of tradition under your palms. And when she finally lifts off the sand, buoyed once more by tide and purpose, you smile, because you understand now. This isn't about proving something to the world. It's about remembering who you are. As Hokulea sails into the horizon, sails catching the light like pages of a book being turned, you stand ankle deep in water, holding the silence with both hands, and you vow to keep the story moving. The next island is smaller, fewer trees, a tighter ring of reef, but the people welcome you just the same with quiet smiles, woven mats to sit on, and stories already unspooling like sailcloth in the breeze. You're no longer seen as a visitor. You're a listener, and now perhaps a keeper of stories too. An elder approaches barefoot, shirtless, adorned with beads that clink softly when he moves. His eyes are deeply set, his face weathered like sun-dried wood. He doesn't ask your name. He simply says, "You've heard the stars. Come hear what we've kept hidden below them." And so begins your 13th lesson, the quiet brilliance of Micronesian navigators and the legends the world nearly forgot. He leads you to a shaded spot where younger men sit in a semicircle, each holding shell sticks and palm frond cords. The elder begins to speak, not loudly, not solemnly, just steadily, like the tide returning to shore. He tells of Maupiailug, the master navigator who trained on Satawal, a man who memorized thousands of nautical miles by heart, who could sail without ever glancing at a compass. Mao was one of the last, not because others lacked the gift, but because the world had stopped asking for it. The elder points to a boy holding a curved stick chart. This, he says, is not for the eyes. It's for the back. You sleep on it. You let it press against your spine until the ocean is inside your bones. You try not to blink too hard. These Micronesian charts, Rebelib's, Meadows, Matangs, were more than tools. They were compressions of experience, a feeling of lessons handed down through generations who never needed ink. You watch as the elder traces his finger along one arc. Here, he says, the swell crosses a ridge near Nukuoro. When you feel it shift under your ribs, you'll know you've passed it. Historians still debate whether such navigation could really account for thousands of miles, especially without visual landmarks. But sitting here watching the boy recite island positions from memory, matching each one to a rise or fall in the wavelines of his chart, you stop doubting. You stop wondering entirely. You simply believe. Because here's something else. The elder says, almost like an afterthought, these stories aren't told to impress. They're told to preserve. If we stop telling them, we stop existing. You ask him when he first sailed alone. He grins. Before I could grow a beard. He gestures to a carving nearby, a canoe resting under a thatched lean-to. My grandfather made that one. Took him a year. But he could name every swell by age like naming uncles. The stories continue. Tales of lightning and stars. Of sharks that followed specific clans. Of a night when no stars appeared and the wayfinder used wind alone to find home. You're offered food, grilled fish, wrapped in taro leaves. Coconut water in a carved shell. And as you eat, a boy beside you hums a tune under his breath. It's not a song you know, not a chant you've heard, but it follows a pattern like tide and star, like direction and return. And you realize even the songs here are maps. Later, as the sun dips low and the sea glows amber, you sit alone by the reef and trace the edge of a shell gifted to you. It's shaped like a crescent moon, light but solid. You think about how much of the world is written in things that don't require writing. Clouds, bones, water, shells. And for the first time, you don't feel like you're learning ancient knowledge. You feel like you're finally remembering it. You paddle slowly through shallow reef waters, the tide whispering beneath you, light bending through coral and warm, flickering ribbons. The canoe moves like it remembers this place, even if you don't. Overhead clouds are scattered like breadcrumbs for the sky to follow. You're not in a rush. Not now. Because the more you learn, the more you understand this journey isn't just skill or memory. It's something deeper. Something sacred. Your teacher who returned to meet you days ago now walks beside the waterline as you guide the canoe along the shore. He's silent again, but it's not the heavy silence of judgment. It's the kind you share with old friends when words are simply unnecessary. Eventually, he lifts his hand and gestures for you to come ashore. He leads you to a circle of stones arranged near a grove of pandanus trees. Some are smooth-rounded from years of wind and salt. Others are carved faintly marked with etchings so old they could be waves or words. Here your final major lesson begins. Not one of motion, but meaning. Lesson 14, where science meets sacred. He places a stone in your palm. Heavy, warm from the sun. This stone came from another island, he says. Carried here. Like you. You nod, unsure whether to feel complimented or exposed. Then he points to the horizon. Our ancestors knew this, he says, that the world could be mapped without ever drawing a line. The world of wayfinding is practical, yes. It's stars and swells, winds and clouds. But it's also layered with spiritual resonance. Each technique is also a prayer. Each chant is also a calculation. Each decision made on a canoe can be both a correction and a connection to ancestors, to place to the pulse of the world. Historians still debate how much of ancient navigation was spiritual ritual versus observational science. But the division itself is modern. To the wayfinders, there was no contradiction. To name a star was to chart a course and honor a god. To track a bird's flight was to read nature and remember your grandfather's story. The sacred was the science. The map was alive. You sit cross-legged beside the circle and listen as he tells the story of the star Lehuacona, a guide in the southern sky associated with ancestral voyagers who never returned yet, whose memory never drifted. Some say she rises lower now, as if bending closer to watch. You're handed a bundle of woven leaves. Inside coral dust, crushed shell, and oil. You're instructed to anoint your palms, not because you're injured, but because you're beginning. It's explained that many voyages begin with such blessings, not to ask for safety, but to remember humility. The canoe is not yours, he says. It lets you borrow it. You whisper that phrase to yourself again and again. You help rebuild a segment of a canoe shelter that afternoon, hauling logs, adjusting thatch, threading coconut fiber ropes through loops already polished by hands long gone. It's simple work, but your arms ache in a familiar, satisfying way. It reminds you of your first night at sea, when nothing moved except the canoe and your own doubt. And now you lift and tie and adjust as if your hands know before you ask them. At dusk, the elder, who gave you the shell-shaped memory, joins you by the fire. He carries a staff, its top carved with a spiral. This is what lives below everything he says. Not just waves and wind, but memory. He presses the staff into the sand and draws concentric circles around it. This, he says, is how we see the world. Not straight lines, not destination, but return. Layer after layer. Same stars, different meanings. Same winds, different years. You close your eyes, and the circles remain imprinted behind your eyelids. The fire crackles. A conch sounds from somewhere inland. The sea hums softly. And in that moment, the entire world feels like one great turning map, alive, sacred, soft beneath your feet. The fire has burned low. Only coals remain now, glowing like fallen stars scattered in the sand. You sit near the edge of the beach, the canoe outlined in moonlight beside you, resting, breathing. Even the wind has softened. All is still. Tonight, you are not a student. You are not an outsider. You are simply someone who has listened long enough to hear the world speak back. Your teacher joins you quietly, placing something in your hand. It's a smooth piece of driftwood carved faintly with the outline of a wave on one side and a star on the other. It's not a tool, he says. It's a reminder. You nod. Words feel heavy now, like overused oars. You don't need them. Because this is the 15th and final lesson, becoming the island's memory. Not just a carrier of knowledge, but a living map. A constellation of muscle, wind rhythm, and trust. You know now that to be a navigator is not to master the sea. It is to join it, to become part of a story bigger than direction, bigger than destination. You walk the shore alone, the sand cool beneath your feet. Every sound feels amplified. The sigh of the reef, the rattle of a palm frond, the distant whistle of a night bird. Your steps are quiet, not cautious, but conscious. You remember the first time you heard someone say, "The stars are not just above you. Carry them within." Back then, it sounded poetic. Now it sounds like truth. Because you do carry them. Each rising point is stitched into your spine. Each cloud's whisper lingers behind your ribs. You could draw the sidereal compass from memory with your eyes closed. Not on paper, but in the way you lean when you walk, in how you shift your weight on the canoe, in the angle of your face when you taste the air for rain. You were once a visitor. Now the sea knows your name. You return to the canoe and run your fingers along the lashings. You test the tension of a rope, adjust the sail slightly, not because it needs it, but because you care. You understand now what it means to treat a vessel like a companion, not a possession. The crew gathers quietly for a farewell meal. There is no ceremony, no loud chant, just food passed by hand, small smiles, and stories told with laughter tucked between them. You eat in silence, tasting salt sweetness and the bittersweet, knowing that this part of the voyage is done. You stand once more at the water's edge. Your teacher steps beside you, arms crossed. "What now?" you ask. He shrugs. The sea waits. You think of all the places you haven't yet seen, the stars you haven't yet named, the currents you haven't yet ridden. But something deeper stirs the realization that this isn't about where you go. It's about how you return. To the stars, to your memory, to yourself. You close your eyes one last time and breathe in the sea. It smells like everything. And now let us drift softly into the quiet. Wind down. 300 words. Let the stars fade now. Let the swell soften beneath you until the water is just a cradle for your breath. You've sailed far through time, through memory, through a world where maps aren't drawn, but lived. Where birds sketch invisible paths across the sky and clouds whisper secrets known only to those who wait. Let your body settle. Your shoulders grow heavier. Your hands rest. There's nothing more to steer, no course to correct. Just the slow, steady motion of remembering. The canoe beneath you doesn't creak now, it exhales. It recognizes the stillness in you. The ocean no longer tests you, it carries you. Breathe in. The scent of salt, of warm wood, of wind, carrying the scent of unseen flowers. Breathe out. Let the noise of the day fall away like peeling bark. The stars still shine above, though your eyes may close. You've memorized their voices. They'll keep speaking. You don't need to watch. You are not lost. You are not searching. You are not drifting. You are carried. The night deepens and your body quiets. The last sound is the whisper of tide against hull. The story continues without urgency, without ending. Just motion. Just breath. Just you. Safe. Still. Floating.